Welcome to our lecture online. Here are 4 additional examples to hopefully solidify your understanding of how to find the signs when we try to factor these types of trinomials. Notice they're all of the form x squared plus bx plus c, but notice they're not all positive. Here we have 2 positive signs, a negative and a positive and a negative, and a negative and a negative. And each case requires a special method to figure out what the signs will be. Now the 2 on the right, we can already conclude that since the third term is positive, and since that is obtained by multiplying 2 numbers together, that means that those 2 numbers either must be positive or they must be negative. Over here, since the last term is negative, that means that one of the numbers must be positive and one of the numbers must be negative, because when we multiply them together, we should get a negative result. Now notice, if the middle term is positive, then the 2 numbers multiplied together, the positive number is bigger, and it's bigger by the amount that's seen right there. And then when the middle term is negative, when we multiply the 2 numbers together, the negative one will be bigger, and it'll be bigger by the amount that we see on the middle term. So that said, let's go ahead and work these out. So here we can see that we end up with x and x. And since both the middle term and the third term, they're both positive, that means we must have both positive in both of the binomials. Now to get the number 12, that can be by multiplying 1 and 12, 2 and 6, and 3 and 4. Now notice which 2, when I add them together, give me 8. The only possibility is 2 times 6, so therefore I need a 2 and a 6, because when I add them together, I get 8. Now here I have a negative 8. That means that both of the numbers must be negative, and when I add them together, I get negative 8. Again, the possibilities are 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4, but notice they both must be negative, so it's a negative 1 times a negative 12, and a negative 2 times a negative 6, and a negative 3 times a negative 4, so it's the same as what I have over here, but now they're both negative. And when I add them together, I should get negative 8. Again, the only possibility would be a negative 2 and a negative 6, which means that this will be factored as x minus 2 times x minus 6. Coming over here, I realize that one must be positive and one must be negative. So this is going to look like this. 1 positive, 1 negative. Over here, notice that again, x plus and x minus, 1 must be positive and 1 must be negative. But you realize that in this case, the positive one must be the biggest of the 2, and here the negative one must be the biggest of the 2, and the difference between the 2 numbers should be 4, the middle term. Again, we can look at this and go 1 times 12, 2 times 6, and 3 times 4. I know that the difference between the 2 numbers must be 4, so that can only be 2 and 6. So again, right here, 1 times 12, 2 times 6, 3 times 4. Notice that the numbers must be different by 4. So again, 2 and 6 are the only 2 possibilities. And we know that in this case, the positive number must be bigger, because when I add them together, I get a positive number. That means plus 6 and minus 2. And over here, the negative must be a bigger number, which means I get a negative 6 and a positive 2. When I add these 2 together, I get negative 4. When I add these 2 together, I get a positive 4. And that is how we decide on the signs and which number goes with which sign. That's how it's done.